Okay, hello and welcome to my presentation on the philosophy of regulation in the classroom. My name is Aubrie Cyphers and I chose to talk about regulation in the classroom because I don't plan on pursuing clinical work. So this way made more sense to me as I plan to pursue a career in education. Let's get started. So our introduction, we are going to talk about the increase in student dysregulation after we have experienced the pandemic. We are still seeing a lot of student dysregulation, and we're over 5 years past the pandemic, but we're still seeing it. And we'll look at this through the lens of trauma being a barrier to learning and the philosophy of component-based psychotherapy in our textbook provides a framework for repatterning the nervous system's survival response. So that means establishing safety and predictability, prioritizing body-based interventions since trauma is body-based, and talking about the power of co-regulation, and that is the relationship between teachers and students in the case that I'm talking about. All right, trauma as dysregulation. So trauma affects one's ability to develop skills to regulate the internal states, and dysregulation manifests as affective dysregulation. That's where you see intense emotions, mood swings, volatility, and maybe even anxiety. And there's also the physiological side of having low energy. I believe that's hypoarousal or having like a high heart rate of hyperarousal. And you can see this within body memories. And then biorhythmic dysregulation is the inability to sleep or maybe even to feel full after eating. And then trauma and dysregulation affects relationships. And I will talk about that more. So, what does dysregulation look like? Children who have experienced neglect and abuse have deficits in the capacity to self-regulate because they lack those co-regulation and the attachment that was found in their early relationships. In the school setting, this can be seen as a child's inability to focus, whether it's physiological dysregulation as they're disruptive, or maybe they're unable to focus and we see them as lazy because they always have their heads down. This can also be seen in relational dysregulation if in this teacher-student relationship or any staff adult and student relationship, as the presence of someone in authority can trigger those survival responses that that child has. This means in schools, we're seeing more kids experiencing more meltdowns, we're seeing more intense behavior, and we're even seeing defiance from kids. And that's because these kids have a very small window of tolerance. They were not able to expand that tolerance because of trauma. So, more about the school setting. This picture actually is of a classroom that I worked in for summer school. So, okay, in an interview with a professional who leads classroom management training across the United States, children returned to schools after our recent pandemic with more bigger behaviors than ever before, the most dysregulation we've seen. We're going to call these kids the pandemic kids. They experienced trauma because they were stuck at home, they were surrounded by stress all of the time, and that became like their normal, that became survival. And they didn't receive any social skills because they were at home, they didn't go to school to practice social emotional connection, and therefore they lacked practicing regulation skills. And the teachers are still facing these challenges. They're unaware of how to manage students, and that causes teachers to become dysregulated, which is not good. So regulation needs to be seen as safety, reestablishing the safety and connection. That's the solution, and it should be focused on problem solving as well. So this means that we have conscious and regulated teachers implementing consistent classroom rituals, and their classrooms are low-stress environments. They're practicing breathing, not just one time in the morning. We need to practice breathing through all of the major transitions. And another thing teachers can do is provide a predictable structure. And this can be a visual schedule that they follow every single day of the school year. So the children know what the expectations are and they have a routine that they're following. This is something they didn't have during the pandemic. They would wake up, maybe their parents had a routine for them, but it it wasn't the routine of get up, get ready, get on the bus, go to school. It was get up. Do I get on Zoom today to have school? Or, yeah. These strategies are important because they help repattern the children's responses to trauma, to the distress that they experience. It teaches them to tolerate uncomfortable feelings. They learn how to self-soothe themselves. And of course, because this is relational, they learn that they can trust their teacher as a safe person, and they can learn that this person is predictable and will provide me with a structure. I really loved this quote from the article I read about this professional who went across the United States to help teachers with like behavior management, classroom behavior management after the pandemic. And she said that kids want to feel this way. They want to feel, I belong here, I matter, I am supported when I make a mistake, and people want to see me be successful. And that can only be achieved with regulation. Okay, let's get into the principles of the philosophy of regulation. So first, we have safety and stabilization, or we can even call this predictability. Teachers cannot teach students academics if their nervous systems are dysregulated. Component-based psychotherapy states that one must switch from survival mode to being mindfully present in learning mode. So it is re-traumatizing for someone, a student in this case, who is dysregulated, to have another dysregulated person tell them, calm down, calm down, calm down. You're only adding fuel to the fire, and it's causing even more dysregulation. And we got a big problem here because we have a dysregulated student, and now we have a dysregulated teacher. And that teacher very well can dysregulate all of the other students. Another principle is embodiment and somatic focus. So regulation requires body-based interventions because stress and trauma affects the entire body. We have body responses when we sense trauma. So something teachers can do is to have scheduled regulation opportunities in the classroom. And this is the breathing. We're not going to breathe just one time in the morning and go your entire school day. We want to practice it multiple times after recess, before lunch, before transitioning to maybe another subject. Allowing kids to shift from their state of threat to a state of calm. so they can actually learn something. And some more principles, co-regulation. This is very important. This is found within the relationship, the student-teacher relationship. And we know that teachers' emotional state is just as important as the lesson they are teaching, because those students rely on that teacher to provide the structure and the safety. They can model what a calm nervous system looks like. So, co-regulation, where the teacher regulates the students will learn to use the teacher's presence, and that will regulate them. And when the teacher models a calm voice and a calm body, or even says things like, I'm feeling frustrated right now, I need to take a break. That modeling is very important because that also teaches kids to regulate. And the last principle is restoring agency. So this is teachers giving students choice and control over their regulatory process. We want kids to know their regulation better than we can predict. Because if they're feeling dysregulated, then and we can give them the tools, then they can go and regulate themselves. And this helps reverse the trauma patterns. So, something we see a lot and something I use within my school district are these calm down corners. And these calm down corners provide a safe place for students to go when they feel overwhelmed. And at these calm down corners, there's a nice place to sit, there's fidgets, and different tools for kids to identify their emotions so they can be regulated again. And the point is, after they spend some time in the calm down corner, they can return to class. Here's a picture of me with some of my coworkers. So student regulation is important, but teacher regulation is just as important because of co-regulation. So some strategies that teachers can use is having a partner teacher to send a dysregulated student to, and vice versa. Using the tap in and tap out method. So if a teacher's feeling overwhelmed or frustrated, they're able to take a short break and maybe another staff member can cover, and then they can come back. This is about, teachers, their heart rates and their blood flow needs to return to calm because that's their nervous system. And that's going to restore their ability to teach effectively. So we want to avoid having dysregulated teachers because that will cause dysregulated students. And then, of course, the students seeing their teacher modeling these self-regulation skills is very important. And the goal is that this will increase their capacity for tolerance. Okay, to conclude, regulation is all about giving back control to reverse trauma. A dysregulated students need a regulated adult. Regulation is not a timeout from academics. It's just as important as education. It is education. And by modeling regulation and prioritizing safety, we are moving the students from a state of trauma to a state of mindful presence. Here are my references. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later.